Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, October 27th, 2025. I'm Gary Starhoff. Thank you for joining us. The Senate returned to town today with no end to the government shutdown in sight. Meanwhile, its effects are starting to pile up. Food assistance for more than 40 million low-income Americans are at risk. Major airports are seeing more flight delays because of the growing air traffic controller shortage. And the largest federal workers union is urging Congress to pass a clean funding bill. We'll hear the latest from Senators Thune and Schumer, Speaker Johnson, and Leader Jeffries all about it coming up. President Trump is in Japan today. It's the second stop of his Asia tour. He started the day with a visit with Emperor Naruhito at Tokyo's Imperial Palace. Later, he'll meet with Prime Minister Sani Takaichi. Meanwhile, U.S. trade negotiators are reporting progress on a potential trade deal with China ahead of the president's expected meeting with President Xi Jinping later this week. President Trump spoke to reporters aboard Air Force One. We'll play you some of what he said. We'll start here in Washington. The Senate gavelled in at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when leadership spoke. Here's Republican leader John Thune.
Mr. President, quote, "There is a time and a place to debate health care, just like there is a time and place to debate energy policy and immigration and education, but not when the funding of the federal government and all the lives that are impacted by it hang in the balance," end quote. There is a time and a place to debate health care, but not when the funding of the federal government and all the lives that are impacted by it hang in the balance. Those are not my words, Mr. President. Those are the words of the junior Democrat senator from Connecticut back in 2013. There is a time and a place to debate health care, but not when the funding of the federal government and all the lives that are impacted by it hang in the balance. These words were once emblematic of the Democrat position here in the Senate. Democrats once passionately opposed shutdowns, or so they said, in large part because of the impact they would have on American citizens and American workers. Now, government workers and every other American affected by this shutdown have become nothing more than pawns in the Democrats' political games. On Friday, federal workers missed their entire paychecks. The next paycheck for our troops, Mr. President, is in jeopardy. And more than 40 million Americans could lose access to food stamps if the shutdown continues. 40 million. And yet none of it seems to matter to Senate Democrats. The party that once decried the impact of shutdowns on Americans in need and now apparently content to see 40 million Americans go without food. The senior Democrat senator from Vermont was on TV the other day, and one of the hosts suggested that members of Congress should refuse to take their paychecks during a shutdown. And what did the senior Democrat senator from Vermont say? He said that some members of Congress couldn't afford to go without pay. That's right. That some members of Congress couldn't afford to go without pay. Does he think that other Americans can? The junior Democrat senator from Arizona told NBC News near the beginning of the shutdown that he couldn't afford to miss his paycheck. This was his quote: "I'm not wealthy, and I have 3 kids. I would basically be missing, mortgage payments, rent payments, child support. So it's not feasible, not going to happen," end quote. What on earth does he think is happening to federal workers and other Americans out of work because of the Democrat shutdown? Does he think they don't have mortgage payments, rent payments, school expenses, electric bills? If some members of Congress can't afford to miss a paycheck, how much more is that true for the many workers making a lot less than members of Congress pull down? The junior Democrat senator from Minnesota stated that she would not be foregoing her pay because she's continuing to work. Because she's continuing to work. Do Democrats even hear themselves? She does realize, right, that a lot of other people are continuing to work and have been working without pay now for 4 weeks thanks to her actions and those of her Democrat colleagues. How many of those workers are going to miss their rent payments or mortgage payments before Democrats are satisfied? Shutdowns aren't victimless crimes, the senior Democrat from Virginia said. Less than a year ago, I might add.
Senate Republican leader John Thune. Here's Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
Starting this Saturday, tens of millions of Americans face the specter of financial crisis, all while Donald Trump is dancing on the tarmac in Malaysia. Donald Trump may be having a nice time abroad, but people here at home are dreading open enrollment. Insurance plans that cost $300 or $400 a month will suddenly cost $2,000 a month or more because Republicans prefer to shut the government down over working with Democrats to extend the ACA tax credits. Consequently, the average ACA plan is set to more than double starting next year. The average 60-year-old couple making $85,000 a year will soon have to pay an extra $22,000 or more just to have health insurance. Imagine the specter. The devastation will be felt across the country, even by Americans with private insurance. They're not exempt. Their insurance is going up quite a bit, too. The rate of people without insurance will spike by the millions. More people will get sick. More people will lose coverage. More people will go bankrupt. More people will die from preventable illness. Americans have never seen a health care like this, the one that's about to begin Saturday, and Donald Trump is nowhere to be found. Americans are going to sit at their kitchen tables Friday, Saturday, Sunday and say, how the heck can we pay these bills? What are we going to do without health insurance? What if our kids get sick? What if we get sick? And there is Donald Trump overseas, not even paying attention to this crisis. Instead of sitting down with Leader Jeffries and me, Trump skipped town for his second foreign trip in less than a month. Open enrollment is just days away, and Trump's message to the American people facing financial disaster is, greetings from Malaysia. Here's what the president needs to do. He should negotiate with Democrats to reopen the government and end the ACA crisis right away. The president should stop focusing on foreign escapades, on ballrooms, on bailouts for Argentina, and start focusing on negotiating with Democrats to lower people's health care costs. But Donald Trump isn't taking this crisis seriously still, as millions of Americans are just frightened, tens of millions, about what will happen. Trump continues to use the American people as pawns. This weekend, we learned that the Trump administration, for instance, ordered the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, not to tap into emergency funds to keep SNAP benefits, food benefits flowing to the states. The very same administration that sent $40 million to Argentina at the drop of a hat to help Trump's MAGA ally is now telling hungry families in America they can't have nutrition funding. What gall! The administration's decision to let SNAP freeze is callous, is cynical, and entirely unnecessary. Donald Trump says there's no money to pay hungry kids' workers, but he's spending $40 billion to bail out Argentina, $300 billion on his vanity ballroom, $172 million on 2 luxury jets for Kristi Noem, hundreds of millions for outfitting his foreign jet, but nothing, nothing, nothing to help hungry kids. What war priorities? What a bubble this president lives in, apart, away, and not caring about the trauma the American people are facing when it comes to health care. Let's be very clear. The administration is making an intentional choice not to fund SNAP this weekend. The emergency funding is there. The administration is just choosing not to use it. And for those who say the money can't be moved around so easily, that's a load of bunk. If the administration can cough up $40 billion for Argentina, they can find money for SNAP by this Saturday. This administration that all year long has trampled over the rule of law, illegally impounded funds left and right, suddenly says the law won't let them fund SNAP to feed hungry kids? Give me a break.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. Now, on that issue of food assistance, The Hill's Mike Lillis reporting more than 40 million low-income Americans are at risk of losing some or all of their food assistance this week. That's because the U.S. Department of Agriculture is threatening to withhold billions of dollars in supplemental nutrition assistance program contingency funding, which Congress has already allocated for emergency scenarios. According to a memo that was first reported by Axios, the USDA said the reason is simple. The contingency fund was designed to respond to unforeseen events like natural disasters, and the current shutdown doesn't qualify because it was manufactured by Democrats. That from Axios' reporting. To spend the money on SNAP benefits during such an event, the USDA argues, would be illegal. The memo contradicts the shutdown plan prepared by USDA earlier this year, which said the department is legally obligated to pay SNAP benefits in the event of a shutdown. All that from Axios. On today's Senate agenda, a vote to confirm two of President Trump's nominees for the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals and the U.S. District Court in Central Alabama. Later in the week on the Senate schedule, members will vote for a 13th time to advance a short-term government funding bill. That's the Republican plan that does not extend health care tax credits. That was also passed by the House, and it's the same one most Democratic senators have been voting against. The Senate also scheduled to vote this week on Democratic legislation to end President Trump's Brazil, Canada, and global tariffs. You can always see the Senate live on C-SPAN 2. Now, to the House. They will be back tomorrow for a brief session, but House Republican leaders have canceled votes for a 6th week in a row as they await Senate approval of the short-term funding bill. House Speaker Mike Johnson did speak to reporters this morning at the Capitol. He was asked about those expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits.
The expiring Obamacare subsidy at the end of the year is a serious problem because if you look at it objectively, you know that it is subsidizing bad policy. We're throwing good money at a bad, broken system, and so it needs real reforms. The reason it was never appropriate or never possible to be resolved on a simple CR, stopgap funding measure, is because it's very complicated to fix. But Republicans have a long list of ideas. Leader Scalise has been working with the chairman of our 3 committees of jurisdiction, putting all of that, formulating all that, grabbing the best ideas that we've had for years to put it on paper and make it work. But we know we're going to have to arm wrestle with Democrats over that. Why? Because many of them are avowed to get us to a single-payer system. They do love socialism, my friends. They love Mondami. He wants government to take over everything. They're on board with that program. They think the government can do a better job by taking over health care. We believe in the private sector and the free market and individual providers, their acumen. And we say that if you take the government off their backs and allow for real competition again in health care, you will improve its quality and you will bring down its cost. All of these are important components of that, and we have a lot of work to do, but it is not a simple thing, and I am not going to go in a back room with Chuck Schumer, like he keeps demanding, with 4 people and make this decision. I will not do it. It's not appropriate. It's not right. It's too complicated for that. We need all the members to have buy-in. We need to have these healthy debates and discussions, but we can't do it while they're shutting the government down to appease the Marxists.
House Speaker Mike Johnson. Meanwhile, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries was asked about it yesterday on Face the Nation.
Next Saturday is the beginning of open enrollment. I mean, people are going to see what that bill is going to look like. Practically speaking, aren't you out of time here? Insurance companies have set these premiums in place. That's how they're already in the mail for people to open and see on Saturday. What becomes the strategy after November 1st if this shutdown it lasts that long?
Well, listen, we want to reopen the government, and we need to stand by our hardworking federal employees who are doing all that they can to make sure that taxpayer dollars are spent effectively and efficiently, even under the most adverse circumstances. Remember, in terms of federal employees, the Trump administration has fired or dismissed more than 200,000 civil servants prior to them shutting the government down on October 1st. We want to reopen the government. Now, in terms of health care, part of the reality is that tens of millions of people are already receiving notices in October that their premiums are about to skyrocket because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax rate. And by the way, they have had the opportunity, both House Republicans and Senate Republicans, repeatedly throughout the year to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, and they've consistently voted against it. That's why we need action, not simply words, a wing and a prayer promise from people who have tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act more than 70 different times since 2010.
But aren't the premiums already locked in here, or are you saying Republicans are right when you can make up for it at the end of the year with the tax credit?
The premiums are not locked in terms of the reality that if we can act legislatively and act now, we can extend the open enrollment period. We can push it back, and we can intervene as a Congress in order to actually protect the affordability of health insurance for tens of millions of people.
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries on Face the Nation yesterday. And Politico reporting this afternoon that House Democrats will have an in-person caucus meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. House Republicans have a conference call scheduled tomorrow for 11:30 a.m. Also from Politico, ways the shutdown is about to get worse. Starting tomorrow, more civilian employees across government agencies will miss their first full paychecks. Friday, members of the military will miss their first paycheck. House staffers are also due to miss their pay. And as you've been hearing, on Saturday, funding begins drying up for SNAP food aid, Head Start programs, and WIC nutrition assistance. Also this weekend, Essential Air Service, that subsidizes airline service to small, mostly rural communities, is expected to run out of money. That from Politico. And this from the American Federation of Government Employees President Everett Kelly. Quote, "It's time to pass a clean continuing resolution and end this shutdown today. No half measures, no gamesmanship. Put every single federal worker back on the job with full back pay today." He goes on to write, "There is no winning a government shutdown. They cost taxpayers billions, hurt small businesses, and erode confidence in government itself. And the American people know this. That's why 9 out of 10 Americans think this government shutdown is a problem. It's time for our leaders to start focusing on how to solve problems for the American people rather than on who is going to get the blame for a shutdown that Americans dislike. Because when the folks who serve this country are standing in line for food banks after missing a second paycheck because of this shutdown, they aren't looking for partisan spin. They're looking for wages they earned. The fact that they're being cheated out of it is a national disgrace." That part of a op-ed written by American Federation of Government Employees President Everett Kelly. And some new polling out about the shutdown. A Gallup poll conducted during the shutdown's first 2 weeks in early October found that Congress's approval rating has sunk from a 26% approval rating to a 15% approval rating. A Reuters Ipsos poll out last week found that 50% of respondents blamed Republicans more for the shutdown. 43% blamed Democrats. And a new poll done by WalletHub showed what areas around the country have been most affected by the shutdown. GovExec.com's Sean Michael Newhouse talked about that this morning on Washington Journal.
Yes, so unsurprisingly, D.C. was the state that, well, not state, city
District.
that WalletHub determined was the most impacted because D.C. has the highest percentage of workers who work for the government, also the highest amount of federal contract dollars per capita. You mentioned New Mexico. They determined that was the third most affected. It is the state with the highest percentage of its residents who are SNAP participants. Also, it has one of the highest numbers federal contract dollars per capita, New Mexico. And then number 2, you might think Maryland or Virginia would be number 2, number 3, but actually Hawaii was number 2. And that's because they have a relatively high percentage of workers in Hawaii work for the federal government. Fourth of its economy relies on real estate, and then unsurprisingly, Hawaii has a lot of national parks.
What's your read on why New Hampshire, Nebraska, Indiana, Iowa, and Minnesota are the states with the lowest level of impact, at least according to this set of statistics?
Yes, I wouldn't say I have any particular read. I did notice looking at the states that were least impacted, they did tend to be in the Midwest, but it's just because of the factors that Wallet have determined which states had the most impact. They just had lower scores.
And how has the president's approval rating been affected by the shutdown? Decision Desk HQ's polling average shows President Trump's approval rating has actually ticked up a bit from 44% on September 30th to 46.2% on October 23rd. He still has a 50.7% disapproval rating, that from Decision Desk HQ. You're listening to Washington Today.
The book is called Breakneck, China's Quest to Engineer the Future. Author Dan Wang was born in China in 1992. His parents moved to Canada when he was 7. In 2014, he graduated from the University of Rochester in New York. Then in 2018, Dan Wang went to live in China until he returned to the U.S. in 2023. He then went to the offices of the Yale Law School and wrote about his comparison of China and the United States. He writes in his intro, quote, "A strain of materialism, often crass, runs through both countries, sometimes producing variations of successful entrepreneurs, sometimes creating displays of extraordinary tastelessness, but overall contributing to a spirit of vigorous competition."
Author Dan Wang with his book Breakneck, China's Quest to Engineer the Future, on this episode of Book Notes Plus with our host Brian Lamb. Book Notes Plus is available wherever you get your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now app.
Welcome back to Washington Today. President Trump landed in Tokyo at about 4 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. His meeting with Prime Minister Sani Takaichi is scheduled for 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. The president started his trip over the weekend in Malaysia, where he signed separate trade and mineral agreements with his Malaysian and Cambodian counterparts. He also signed framework trade deals with Thailand and Vietnam. Those 4 countries are part of an 11-member regional free trade group called the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. And also news yesterday at that meeting that the U.S. and China have agreed to a framework trade deal just days before President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are due to meet. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the deal removes the threat of 100% tariffs on Chinese imports that was due to start on November 1st. President Trump was asked about it early this morning on Air Force One.
Do you have any 5% tariffs on China? Is the understanding from both countries that that will remain regardless of what?
No, I don't want to tell you what the understanding is, because what we understood yesterday or 2 days ago or even today is not going to be necessarily what it's going to be in 2 days. I mean, we're going to have a great talk. I have a lot of respect for President Xi. I like him a lot. He likes me a lot, I believe, and respects me, and I think he respects our country a lot. And I think we're going to have a successful transaction for both countries.
Now, that meeting between President Trump and Chinese President Xi is scheduled for Thursday, and there are some reports that the president on this trip could meet again with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Here's what he had to say about that.
Mr. President, you talked about North Korea on your way here. Have you heard anything back from
I haven't mentioned it. I haven't said anything, but I'd love to meet with him if he'd like to meet. I got along great with Kim Jong-un. I liked him. He liked me. If he wants to meet, I'll be in South Korea.
Would you extend your trip in order to try to meet
Say it.
Kim? Would you extend your trip in Asia in order to meet with him?
Well, I hadn't thought of it, but I think the answer would be, yeah, I would do that, sure.
Well, and if when you do,
It's our last stop,
when
so it's pretty easy to do. Yeah, I would do that.
when you do meet with him, sir,
With Kim Jong-un?
yes, what does the U.S. have
Well,
to
I
offer
didn't say
him?
I was meeting with him, but if he'd like to meet him around, I'll be in South Korea, so I can be right over there. We'll hop.
But what could the U.S. offer him at this point?
Well, we have sanctions. Well, that's pretty big to start off with. I would say that's about as big as you get.
Anything as like an inducement to do
I
a
don't
deal?
know. I just had a good relationship with him. I would love to see him if he wants to, if he even gets this message. We haven't mentioned anything, but he knows I'm going over there.
And here's Nick Popley, politics reporter for Time Magazine, on what could be on the agenda at the meeting between President Trump and President Xi.
Well, the most significant aspect of that meeting is that it'll be the first face-to-face meeting between President Xi and President Trump since 2019. And, the two sides will be talking about fentanyl, they'll be talking about TikTok. President Trump may also ask for President Xi's support to pressure Russia and President Putin of Russia. As we know, China has continued to purchase oil and gas from Russia, and so that may be a part of the discussions as well. It's possible that Taiwan comes up in those discussions as well. We know that the United States has remained firm in its stance that it will continue to support and defend Taiwan, but President Xi of China is likely to try to see how far the United States is willing to go on Taiwan. And the other thing that we are going to be watching for is any discussion on those rare earth magnets, those rare earth minerals. So Besson has said that they've reached an agreement to to stop those export controls of rare earth minerals. But it remains again to be seen if they will follow through on that.
Time Magazine politics reporter Nick Popley on this morning's Washington Journal. And from Politico, things are looking much frostier on the trade front with Canada. Even though President Trump said this morning the Canadian government had apologized for an anti-tariff ad that ran during the World Series. That ad featured former President Reagan talking about how tariffs, quote, hurt every American. President Trump told reporters today, quote, they did it very late about the apology. They let it run another 2 nights. He added that he won't meet with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, quote, for a while. Now, Prime Minister Carney was also at the ASEAN meeting. He was asked about this by CBC reporter Murray Brewster.
President Trump says he's canceled these trade talks because he's upset about the Ontario government ad. We've heard from the Business Council of Canada and even some of President Trump's own advisors who suggest the frustration with Canada runs deeper. So is this about the ads or is this about something else?
Well, look, as I say, and there were a series of very detailed, very specific, very comprehensive discussions, negotiations on the areas I just listed to in response to the previous question, up until the point of those ads running. First point. Second point, I would suggest you take the president at his word for his reason. And that is the reason why, from the perspective of the federal government, which I'm responsible, we stand ready to pick up on those discussions when the United States wishes to pick up on those discussions. So those in the room, those exchanging term sheets, those having the discussions about specific areas where we can make mutual progress to the benefit of workers and businesses and communities in our respective countries, had been making progress. Those ads came, the president had the reactions which you have seen, made the decisions that he has made, which, those are his decisions to take, and we're in the situation we're in.
Follow-up? As a follow-up, Prime Minister, given everything that we've seen, do you really think the United States is interested in making a trade deal with Canada?
Look, we are their second largest trading partner. We provide a series of essential goods for their economy. We are one of many providers, but we provide in some areas essential goods for their economy. And we create more room for them to do other things. I'll give you an example. If you look at Canadian exports of aluminum to the United States, and aluminum is bauxite and energy. I mean, there's a little more to it, but you can simplify it to that. The embedded energy in the Canadian aluminum exports, which provides 60% of the aluminum to the U.S. market, is the equivalent of the energy of 10 Hoover dams in the United States.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. You can follow all of our coverage from the president's trip at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. From IndyStar.com, Indiana Republican Governor Mike Braun has officially called lawmakers back to the State House for a special session to redraw the Hoosier State's congressional maps mid-decade as requested by President Trump's administration. But votes to redistrict still aren't there, a Senate Republican spokesperson told IndyStar. After Governor Braun's announcement on October 27th, the special session is expected to start November 3rd. Governor Braun said in a statement, "I am calling a special legislative session to protect Hoosiers from efforts in other states that seek to diminish their voice in Washington and ensure their representation in Congress is fair." Meanwhile, Punchbowl News is reporting that House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries is in Illinois today, meeting with the state Democratic lawmakers to urge them to consider a mid-decade redistricting. And from Fox9.com in Minneapolis, Democratic Governor Tim Walz unveiled on Monday an emergency one-time funding of $4 million for state and tribal nation food shelves. Governor Walz said in a statement, food shelves provide a refuge for hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans, yet the Trump administration has chosen to cut off these critical benefits that keep families from going hungry. But if Washington won't lead, Minnesota will. This funding will serve as a lifeline to help Minnesotans weather the storm. Governor Walz spoke to reporters about it this morning, and he was asked about the limits of state assistance should the federal government shutdown continue.
What capacity does the state have to help out if this drags on, say, for another month?
Yeah, it becomes harder. The ability of the state, the question to be able to backfill in a shutdown becomes harder and harder because we don't get our reimbursements. And then the decision that you heard Commissioner Brown say is we go ahead and give it. We have to be very cautious about once we spend it, there's no reimbursement coming back from the federal government because our responsibility to balance the budget and be accountable for that. So the states can do, and Minnesota, as I think we all know, probably the most generous of the states, we've got some ability to protect our people. But I think some of you saw it today. The LIHEAP, the heating assistance, doesn't apply to propane users, doesn't apply for some of our heating oil users. So those folks are going to be left out there with no heating assistance coming, and they're not protected by the no shutoff rule. So we're concerned about that, trying to figure it out. But I think the biggest thing is we have a federal system that we're all in it together, that we help other states when they need it. But we have a situation where they are trying to divide us amongst ourselves. They're trying to provide specific aid to states that they like at the moment, which is absolutely unconscionable. We would, and the state of Minnesota would do whatever we could to help folks, whether they're in Texas or whether they're in Iowa or whether they're in Massachusetts. States being left on their own is an untenable situation. Either that or give us our money back. Give us our federal money back and we'll deal with it.
Minnesota Democratic Governor Tim Walz. You can see all of that event at cspan.org and the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. From Spectrum News New York 1, as New York City's mayoral race enters its final stretch, tens of thousands of voters turned out across the 5 boroughs over the first 2 days of early voting, a sharp uptick from the last mayoral election. According to preliminary figures from the city's Board of Election, early totals from the 5 boroughs are roughly 4 times higher than the first 2 days of early voting in 2021. At a press conference on Saturday, independent New York City mayor candidate Andrew Cuomo was asked about the state of the race.
Entering the primary, you were the overwhelming favorite, and things didn't work out the way you'd intended. Do you see the flip script here, where the polls indicate that Mr. Mamdani is comfortably in the lead, and that may work to your advantage, that the enthusiasm you have is not being detected in the numbers right now? Do you see it as a sort of an opposite scenario?
Well, what I see is this. I see a desperate candidate who was lost on the debate stage and exposed on the debate stage and embarrassed on the debate stage. He was embarrassed. It was clear to any watcher he had no idea what he was talking about. He had a 25-second script. That's it. And once he's past that 25-second script, he doesn't know what to say. Literally doesn't know what to say. Just rewind, repeat. Zoran Mamdani. That's all he is. And that was clear on the debate stage. And he is now panicked. And this is a totally different tactic. Where did this come from? He's now a victim because he's Muslim. By the way, New Yorkers love the Muslim community and appreciate the Muslim community. They are part of the family of New York.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
I have stood up for the Muslim community. in very tough times, when there was a proposal to build a mosque on the Ground Zero site, and there was a lot of opposition to it, I stood up with Mayor Bloomberg and said, no, we support the Muslim community. Quran speaks of peace. We should build the mosque. When Trump did the Muslim travel ban, I don't know if you remember, New Yorkers came together. I stood up and opposed it. When there were Muslims who were facing discrimination because of religious garb, I passed the bill stopping discriminations based on religious garb. So we love the Muslim community. I've been there for the Muslim community. I'll always be there for the Muslim community. But that shift in tactics, yes. Why? He's been exposed as a fraud.
New York City mayor candidate Andrew Cuomo on Saturday. Meanwhile, Republican nominee Curtis Sliwa appeared at a Sikh temple in Queens yesterday. He was asked about voter turnout.
I want everybody to come out and vote. Obviously, I know there's been a big push for my supporters to vote early and to follow my leadership. I voted on day one. 80,000 other New Yorkers voted. Everybody should come out and exercise the right to vote. Men died in battle in order for that to be preserved. So vote, 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 even if you're not voting for me. Just come on out and vote. That's what democracy is. And that's why I'm hoping that with my vote yesterday for all the Republicans, starting with me at the top, it'll put a nail in the coffin of this talk about anybody dropping out. The people will decide who the next mayor is.
But when you look at the numbers yesterday, the historic record, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, the numbers are very encouraging. I pretty much got an idea of where the votes were coming in. But remember, it's just the first day of 10 days of early voting. And then we know that the actual day of the vote, November 4th, will probably have equal numbers of voters. We may break a record, or we may be at about 1.5 million. And then we'll count the ballots, and we'll have a new mayor. But it's the people who will pick the mayor, not the billionaires, not the insiders, not the influencers. They've been wrong every step of the way.
New York City Republican mayoral candidate Curtis Sliwa. And last night in Queens, the frontrunner, Democrat Zohran Mamdani, held a rally that included Vermont independent Senator Bernie Sanders.
Let me be very clear. As someone who served as mayor of Burlington, Vermont for 8 years, a city just a little bit smaller than New York, I can tell you absolutely that being mayor is not an easy job. In local government, the people hold you accountable for everything. For picking up the trash, for crime problems, for the quality of education that kids receive, for traffic jams, blame the mayor. And that's what mayors have to deal with. And it is not easy. Zohran Mamdani, as mayor, is not going to have all the answers. The problems facing this country and every other major city in America are in fact enormous. So let me say this to you from the bottom of my heart. When he is elected, your job is not over. Zohran is going to need your help every single day. In this unprecedented moment in our nation's history, all of us together must act in an unprecedented way. And that means governing New York City and other cities in an unprecedented way. Please do everything you can to work with Zohran in order to make him and his administration the best administration in the history of New York.
Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders in New York City last night at a rally supporting Democratic mayor candidate Zohran Mamdani. You can see all of our coverage of those events at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. That's also where you can follow our coverage of the federal government shutdown as it moves into its 28th day. It's also where you can find this program as a podcast. It's also on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Starakoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy from Washington and across the country. Coming up Tuesday morning, we'll talk about the government shutdown with Politico congressional reporter Nicholas Wu. Then the Economic Security Project's Mike Conzel and the Mercatus Center's Veronique de Rougy on Trump administration economic policies and their impact on the overall economy. And Republican California Congressman Tom McClintock, a member of the Budget and Judiciary Committees, on the government shutdown and Republican strategy. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN. C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app, or online at cspan.org.